Hi, I'm Lena Carver, 31, standing outside the polished glass doors of Orium, the finest restaurant in Seattle, my palms damp against the burgundy clutch I've borrowed from my roommate. Tonight, I'm facing my estranged family for the first time in 6 years, gathered to celebrate my older brother Daniel's recent promotion to partner at his law firm. The thought of their scrutiny, those familiar, cutting glances that always seem to measure my worth and find it lacking, makes my chest tighten. I smooth my navy dress, modest but tailored, and wonder if it's enough to shield me from their judgment. I left their world of expectations behind, chasing a dream they called reckless, and now I'm back, not to beg for approval, but to confront the past I've outrun. If you're listening to this, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Comments below. If my story resonates, give it a like, and please subscribe to help me keep sharing these moments of truth. It means the world to me. Growing up in Bellevue, Washington, meant carrying the weight of the Carver name. My family wasn't just affluent, we were a dynasty of sorts, known for law degrees, corner offices, and charity galas that doubled as networking events. Our modern lakeside mansion with its floor-to-ceiling windows hosted events where my parents, Victoria and Charles Carver, showcased us like trophies. Daniel, the eldest, was their golden child, destined for legal stardom. My younger sister Claire followed suit, her medical school aspirations earning her endless praise. Then there was me, the middle child, whose passion for music, writing songs, strumming my guitar in the attic, was dismissed as a childish hobby. "Lena's artistic," my mother would say, her smile brittle as if creativity were a phase to outgrow. "She'll settle into something practical soon." While Daniel aced mock trials and Claire memorized anatomy charts, I found solace with our groundskeeper, Miguel, a kind man from Mexico who loved jazz and taught me to hear music in the world around me. The rustle of leaves, the rhythm of rain. "You feel it here," he'd say, tapping his chest as I scribbled lyrics in my notebook. By 14, I was sneaking into Seattle's open mic nights, performing under a fake name. By 17, I was booking gigs at coffee shops, my parents none the wiser. Music was my refuge, the one place I felt whole. "Music's for dreamers, not carvers," my father declared when I suggested studying composition in college. "We build legacies, not fantasies." To keep the peace, I enrolled at Stanford, their alma mater, majoring in economics to appease them. But I minored in music, sneaking into studios to record demos, organizing secret campus concerts that drew crowds of students hungry for something raw. I lived a double life, balancing spreadsheets with songwriting, until my senior year when everything changed. A visiting professor, Elena Voss, a renowned music producer with Grammys to her name, heard me perform at a dive bar off campus. After my set, she approached me, her eyes sharp but warm. "Who taught you to write like that?" she asked. "No one," I admitted. "Just years of listening, feeling, trying." She handed me her card. "You're wasting your gift here. Come to my studio in Los Angeles. I'll teach you to shine." That moment cracked my world open. 2 months later, I stood in my parents' pristine living room, announcing I was leaving Stanford's graduate program to pursue music full-time. The silence was suffocating. "This is madness," my father said, his voice low and final. "We've given you every opportunity." "Except the one I need," I replied, my voice shaking. My mother's eyes narrowed. "If you choose this path, you're on your own. No trust fund, no safety net." Daniel, already climbing the ranks at a law firm, smirked. "Good luck scraping by with your guitar." Claire, home from her first year of med school, just looked away, embarrassed. I left that night with a duffel bag, $4,000 in savings, and a one-way bus ticket to LA. The next 6 years were grueling. I shared a cramped apartment with 4 other struggling artists, worked barista shifts at dawn, and spent nights in Elena's studio, learning production, refining my sound. I played gigs for tips, faced rejections from labels, and cried myself to sleep more times than I could count. But under Elena's mentorship, I grew. My songs, raw and honest, started gaining traction online. A single I released independently went viral, catching the ear of a major label. 3 years ago, I signed a deal, and my debut album, Whispers of Truth, hit the charts. Last year, I opened my own studio, Solstice Sounds, producing for other artists while writing my second album, Billboard called me a voice of a generation. Through it all, I kept my family at arm's length. Brief, awkward calls with my mother, a Christmas card from Claire. They knew I was doing music, but not the scale of my success. I wanted it that way, craving recognition on my terms, not theirs. When Daniel's invitation arrived for his promotion dinner at Orium, I hesitated. They didn't know I co-owned the restaurant, a passion project I'd started with my label's CEO, who loved my vision of a space where music and cuisine intertwined. They'd chosen it for its prestige, unaware it was mine. After days of debate, I accepted, not to prove myself, but to close a wound. 6 years had taught me my worth. I could face them now without breaking. But as I stepped into Orium, the scent of truffle oil and live jazz from the stage I'd designed stirred a mix of pride and dread. I'd dressed carefully, navy dress, silver earrings, hair in loose waves, knowing they'd read my simplicity as failure. My hostess, Nadia, spotted me and nearly said my name before catching herself. "Your party's seated, miss," she said, guiding me to the central table where my family sat, a portrait of wealth. My mother, in a cream Dior suit, scanned me head to toe, her lips pursing. Daniel, in a tailored blazer, rose with his fiancée, Sarah, a marketing VP with a diamond that screamed status. Claire and her husband, Tom, a surgeon, completed the scene, their attire fresh from hospital rounds. My father, sipping a martini, gave me a stiff nod. "Lena, you made it," my mother said, air kissing my cheeks. "We were worried you'd be late." "Right on time," I replied, glancing at my watch. Daniel introduced Sarah, whose handshake was firm, her smile practiced. "Harvard MBA, just made partner at Klein & Associates," she said, credentials. First, no warmth. Claire hugged me briefly, but Tom's greeting was curt, his eyes already on the menu. "Champagne's ordered," my father announced, signaling they'd picked the priciest bottle. Typical. As I sat, the restaurant's hum enveloped me. The clink of glasses, the soft jazz trio I'd auditioned myself. Every detail, from the velvet chairs to the hand-blown glass chandeliers, was my creation. My staff, sensing my presence, exchanged subtle glances. Javier, my sommelier, approached with the champagne, his eyebrow raised in question. I shook my head slightly. I wasn't ready to reveal myself. To Daniel's partnership, my father toasted, glasses clinking. I sipped, noting the perfect chill I'd trained my team to maintain. "So, Lena," my mother began, her tone probing. "What's new with you? You've been so quiet." All eyes turned to me, expectant, ready to judge. "I've been working in music," I said vaguely. "Still chasing that dream?" Daniel asked, his tone pitying. "I thought you'd have found something stable by now." Sarah frowned. "What do you do exactly? Sing at bars?" "A bit of everything," I replied, dodging. "Songwriting, performing, producing?" My mother sighed. "Well, it's good you're keeping busy. Dear, our door's always open if things get tough." Nadia arrived with the amuse-bouche, a lavender-infused scallop ceviche I'd crafted. "Compliments of the kitchen," she said, her eyes flicking to mine. My mother nibbled daintily while Daniel barely tasted it, too busy boasting about his firm. Claire left hers untouched. "Too fishy," she muttered. I bit my tongue, protective of my team's pride. The evening was just beginning, but the old dynamic was clear. I was the dreamer, the failure, here to be pitied. Yet beneath it all, I held a secret that would soon shift everything. The first course arrived at our table in Orium, a delicate arrangement of roasted beets with pistachio cream and microgreens, a dish I'd spent weeks perfecting for the spring menu. The plates were set down with the quiet precision I'd drilled into my staff, each element placed to catch the light. I watched my family's reactions, a knot forming in my stomach. My mother, Victoria, poked at the beets with her fork, her expression skeptical. "This is rather artistic," she said, her tone implying it wasn't a compliment. Daniel, my brother, cut into his portion without looking, mid-sentence about a high-profile case he'd won. His fiancée, Sarah, took a small bite and frowned. "It's a bit earthy," she remarked, as if I weren't sitting across from her. Claire, my sister, barely touched hers, distracted by her phone, while her husband Tom muttered, "Not enough protein." My father, Charles, ate mechanically, his focus on the wine list. I took a slow breath, tasting my own dish, but barely registering its balance of sweet and nutty. Their dismissals stung, not just for me, but for the team who'd poured their hearts into this. Owning Orium was a dream I hadn't dared imagine back then, a place where my music and my love for storytelling through food could coexist. But to my family, I was still the dreamer who'd thrown away a Stanford degree. "I've diversified," I said, dodging their probes. "I keep busy." My father cleared his throat, his go-to move when he wanted to sound authoritative. "Lena, there's no shame in starting over. I could connect you with a friend at Goldman Sachs, entry level, but it's a foot in the door." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, you don't want to be 40 and still chasing gigs." Sarah added, "Or you could pivot to marketing. Music's a tough sell without a brand." Their advice, cloaked as concern, felt like a script I'd heard 1,000 times. I let it wash over me, focusing on the jazz trio's rendition of "Summertime," a song I'd chosen for its warmth. The 6th course arrived, a mushroom risotto with foraged morels and a Parmesan crisp, a dish inspired by a hike I'd taken in the Cascades. Amara had nailed the texture, creamy yet firm, and I savored a bite, letting the umami ground me. My mother took one spoonful and set her fork down. "Too heavy for this late in the meal," she declared. Daniel agreed, pushing his plate aside. "I'm not big on mushrooms." Sarah took a photo for her Instagram, then ignored the dish. Claire didn't even try it, citing a gluten intolerance I'd never heard of. Tom ate a few bites, then said, "It's decent, but I'd rather have steak." My father, ever the critic, muttered, "Overpriced for rice." I clenched my jaw, feeling a surge of loyalty to my team, who'd spent hours sourcing those morels. "So, Lena," Claire said, finally putting her phone down, "how are you paying for this dinner? This place isn't cheap." Her tone was sharp, a challenge. Sarah jumped in. "Yeah, I looked up the menu online. A meal here costs a fortune. Are you splitting it with someone?" Daniel leaned back, smirking. "Or did you save up for months to impress us?" My mother's eyes narrowed, scanning me like she could calculate my net worth from my dress. "We don't want you straining yourself, dear." My father added, "If you're struggling, we can cover you. Just say the word." Their assumptions burned, not because they doubted my finances, but because they doubted me. I'd spent 6 years building a life they couldn't fathom, headlining festivals, producing for rising stars, turning Orium into Seattle's hottest reservation. I'd bought out my business partner last year, making me sole owner. Yet here they sat, assuming I was one bad gig away from bankruptcy. "I can handle my share," I said, my voice steady but tight. Claire laughed. "Come on, Lena, be real. Are you maxing out credit cards for this?" Daniel pressed. "Or is there a guy footing the bill? No judgment." The table fell silent, their eyes boring into me, waiting for a confession of failure. Before I could respond, Javier approached with the 7th course, a palate-cleansing grapefruit sorbet with a mint sprig. "Compliments of the kitchen," he said, his gaze lingering on me. I nodded slightly, grateful for his discretion. My mother took a tiny spoonful and grimaced. "Too tart." Daniel didn't touch his, distracted by a work email. Sarah snapped another photo, then pushed it away. Claire and Tom barely acknowledged it. My father ate his quickly, then signaled for another bottle of wine, choosing a $600 Cabernet I'd sourced from a Napa vineyard I'd visited last spring. "This better be worth it," he muttered. Javier shot me a look, asking if I wanted to correct the pairing. I shook my head. Let them have their way for now. "Lena, you still haven't answered," Claire said, her voice dripping with false concern. "How are you affording this? We're just worried about you." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, this place is out of your league, no offense." Sarah added, "It's okay to admit if you're in over your head. We've all been there." Their words were a chorus of condescension, each note perfectly pitched to remind me of my place. I felt the old Lena, the one who'd shrink under their scrutiny, stirring, but I pushed her down. I wasn't that girl anymore. I'd built something extraordinary, and their ignorance of it was their loss, not mine. As the eighth course, a Wagyu beef medallion with a red wine demi-glace, arrived, I braced myself. This was Amara's masterpiece, a dish that had landed us on Best New Restaurants lists. But I knew what was coming. More complaints, more dismissals. And beyond that, the check, the moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I could feel the tension building, the weight of my secret pressing against my ribs. Soon I'd have to decide, keep playing their game or turn the table upside down. The Wagyu beef medallion, nestled in a pool of red wine demi-glace with a crown, of crispy shallots arrived at our table in Orium, with the quiet reverence my staff reserved for their best work. The dish was a triumph, a nod to my love for bold flavors tempered by elegance, and it had earned us a spot on a national must-try list. I watched my family, my heart pounding, knowing their reactions would test my restraint. My mother, Victoria, sliced a tiny piece, her movements precise as if dissecting a specimen. "It's rich," she said, her tone implying excess was a flaw. Daniel, my brother, took a bite mid-sentence about his firm's latest acquisition, barely pausing to taste it. His fiancée, Sarah, chewed thoughtfully but said, "It's a bit heavy for my palate." Claire, my sister, poked at the shallots, muttering, "Too greasy." Her husband, Tom, ate half, then declared, "Steak's good, but I'd rather have a ribeye." My father, Charles, finished his portion but grumbled, "For this price, I expect more meat." Each critique landed like a pebble in a still pond, rippling through my composure. Orium wasn't just a restaurant. It was an extension of me, a place where my music and my vision for connection through food intertwined. The Wagyu had been sourced from a small ranch in Oregon, the demi-glace reduced over hours to achieve its depth. My chef de cuisine, Amara, had executed it with precision, and my team took pride in every plate. Yet my family treated it like a takeout order gone wrong. I caught Nadia, my hostess, watching from the corner, her eyes sharp with concern. I gave her a small shake of my head, signaling to hold off. I wasn't ready to drop the truth, though the urge was growing, a fire kindling in my chest. "Lena," Sarah said, setting down her fork, "you still haven't explained how you're covering this dinner. This place is exorbitant." Her voice carried a mix of curiosity and accusation, as if my presence here was a puzzle she needed to solve. Daniel leaned forward, smirking. "Yeah, Lena, what's the deal? You're not secretly a tech heiress, are you?" Claire laughed, her phone finally set aside. "Maybe she's got a sugar daddy bankrolling her." Tom chuckled, adding, "No. Shame in that, Lena. Times are tough." My mother's lips pursed, her classic sign of disapproval. "We just want to make sure you're not in over your head, dear." My father nodded, his tone patronizing. "If you need us to chip in, just say so, we're family." Their words were a familiar script, one I'd heard since I was a teenager sneaking out to open mic nights in Seattle. Back then, they dismissed my music as a phase, insisting I follow Daniel into law or Claire into medicine. 6 years ago, I'd defied them, leaving Stanford's grad program for LA's music scene. I'd faced rejection, poverty, and doubt, but I'd also found my voice. My album, Whispers of Truth, had gone platinum, and Solstice Sounds, my studio, was thriving. Orium was my latest triumph, a space where live jazz and exquisite dishes told stories together. But to them, I was still the wayward daughter, scraping by on dreams. I sipped my wine, the Cabernet my father had insisted on, and let their assumptions hang in the air. "I'm managing," I said, my voice steady but tight. Claire rolled her eyes. "Managing how? This dinner probably costs more than your rent." Sarah pressed. "Are you taking out loans? Or is someone else paying?" Daniel's smirk widened. "Come on, Lena. Spill. We're all curious." So, table's attention locked onto me, their eyes dissecting, waiting for me to admit defeat. I felt the old weight of their judgment, the same pressure that had once made me shrink. But I wasn't that Lena anymore. I'd built a life they couldn't imagine, and their ignorance was a choice I'd let them make, until now. The dessert course arrived, a deconstructed blackberry tart with lavender cream and a hazelnut crumble, a dish I'd created to evoke summer nights in Bellevue when I'd write songs under the stars. Amara had outdone herself, the plate a work of art. My mother took a single bite and sighed. Too sweet. Daniel pushed his away, distracted by a text. Sarah snapped a photo but didn't eat. Claire declared, "I don't do berries." Tom ate his quickly, then said, "Not bad, but I prefer pie." My father, ever practical, muttered, "This is why I stick to coffee for dessert." I savored my own portion, the tart's brightness cutting through my rising frustration. My team deserved better than this? Javier approached, his demeanor calm but his eyes questioning as he cleared the plates. "Is everything satisfactory?" he asked, lingering on Claire's untouched dessert. "It's fine," she said dismissively, "just not my taste." Javier's jaw tightened, a flicker of loyalty to me, but he nodded and retreated. I felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for my work, but for the family I'd built here at Orium, the staff who believed in my vision. My biological family's disdain was one thing, their disrespect for my team was another. "Lena, you're dodging," Daniel said, leaning back with a smug grin. "How are you paying for this? Seriously?" Sarah nodded. "It's okay to admit, if you're struggling, we've all had rough patches." Claire's tone turned sharp. "Yeah, Lena, don't pretend you're something you're not. This place is way out of your league." My mother's voice softened, but it was no less cutting. "We're just concerned, dear. We don't want you living beyond your means." My father added, "If you're in debt, we can help. But you need to be honest." The air grew heavy, their words a gauntlet thrown down. I could feel the moment approaching, the one I'd both dreaded and craved. The check was coming, and with it, the chance to upend their narrative. I'd let them assume I was failing, let them critique my life's work, because I wanted to see their true colors. And they'd shown them, vividly. I was done playing the role of the struggling artist they'd cast me in. Nadia approached with the black leather folder containing the bill, placing it discreetly in the center of the table. My father reached for it instinctively, but Daniel intercepted, his lawyer's ego on display. "Let me," he said, his tone generous but calculated as if paying were a power move. Sarah smiled approvingly, but as Daniel opened the folder, his confident expression faltered. "This can't be right," he muttered, scanning the numbers. My father frowned. "What's wrong?" Daniel hesitated, then said, "They've only charged for the drinks, not the food." He signaled for Nadia, his voice sharp. "There's a mistake on the bill." Nadia approached, her professionalism flawless, but her eyes flicked to me, seeking guidance. I gave her a slight nod, my heart racing. The moment was here. "No mistake, sir," she said smoothly. "The meal is compliments of the house." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Compliments? From who?" Nadia turned to me, her smile warm but controlled. "Miss Lena, it's good to have you back. Your investors are ready in the private room whenever you're set." The silence that followed was deafening, a sudden vacuum swallowing the table's chatter. 6 pairs of eyes turned to me, shock and confusion warring on their faces. "Thank you, Nadia," I said, my voice calm despite the adrenaline surging through me. "Please close out Mr. Carver's beverage tab. The rest is covered, as usual." Nadia nodded, taking the folder from Daniel's stunned grip. "Amara also asked for your input on the new summer menu," she added. "I'll swing by the kitchen after my meeting," I replied. My mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling. "Lena, what is this?" I took a deep breath, the weight of 6 years lifting slightly. "Welcome to Orium," I said. "My restaurant. I'm the co-owner and creative director." The truth hung in the air, a note struck perfectly, ready to change everything. The silence at our table in Orium was a living thing, thick and heavy, as my family processed my revelation. I'd just announced that I was the co-owner and creative director of the restaurant they'd spent the evening critiquing. My mother, Victoria, clutched her pearls, her face a mask of disbelief. Daniel, my brother, stared at me, his lawyers, composure cracking. His fiancée, Sarah, blinked rapidly as if recalculating her assumptions. Claire, my sister, set her phone down, her mouth slightly open. Her husband, Tom, leaned back, his surgeon's arrogance replaced by confusion. My father, Charles, narrowed his eyes, his mind already working through the implications. I stood at the edge of the table, my navy dress suddenly feeling like armor, and let the moment stretch, savoring the shift in power. Lena, my father said, his voice cautious, you're saying you own this place? I nodded, my tone steady. Yes, I co-own Orium. I oversee the menu, the music, everything you've experienced tonight. Claire let out a sharp laugh, more nervous than mocking. That's impossible. This is the Orium. It's been on every foodie list in the city. Sarah's eyes darted around the restaurant, taking in the velvet chairs, the jazz trio, the hand-blown chandeliers I'd chosen. But you said you were in music, she stammered. I am, I replied. This is part of it. Orium's my vision, food and music as one story. My mother's hand dropped from her pearls, her voice taking on that coaxing tone she used to smooth over social disasters. Darling, why didn't you tell us? This is extraordinary. The word extraordinary carried a weight it wouldn't have an hour ago when they thought I was scraping by. Daniel leaned forward, his lawyer's brain kicking in. How did you manage this? A place like this cost millions. I met his gaze. Hard work, a few smart risks, and people who believed in me. I didn't mention Elena Voss, my mentor, whose guidance had turned my raw talent into a career, or the label CEO who'd partnered with me to open Orium. Let them wonder. I took a deep breath, the adrenaline of my confession settling into a calm resolve. 6 years ago, I left Bellevue with nothing but a duffel bag and a few $1,000s. I moved to LA, lived in a shoebox apartment with 4 roommates, worked barista shifts to pay for studio time. I played gigs for tips, got rejected by every label in town, but I kept writing, kept performing. Then my single went viral, and I signed a deal. My album, Whispers of Truth, hit the charts. I opened Solstice Sounds, my own studio, and started producing for others. Orium came later, when I wanted a place to blend my love for music and food. I bought out my partner last year. This, I gestured around the dining room, is mine. My father's expression shifted from skepticism to calculation, the way it did when he smelled a business opportunity. You funded this with music money? That's impressive. The word sounded foreign coming from him. Claire's voice was small. You're in magazines. I saw your name in Billboard. Sarah nodded, her earlier condescension gone. I didn't connect it. I thought it was a different Lena Carver. Tom, usually so quick to judge, stayed silent, his eyes on his empty plate. My mother tried again, her tone softer. Why keep this from us, Lena? We're your family. I laughed, sharp and involuntary. Family? 6 years ago, you called my music a waste of time. You cut me off, financially, emotionally, when I chose it over grad school. Tonight you sat here tearing apart my food, my wine, my life, assuming I was failing. I wanted to see how you'd treat me if you thought I was still the disappointment you wrote off. Daniel flinched, his smugness gone. That's not fair, Lena. We didn't know. Exactly, I said, my voice steady. You didn't know I was successful, but you also didn't care that I was doing what I loved. That should have been enough. Amara, my chef de cuisine, approached, her white coat pristine, the name Amara Patel, chef de cuisine embroidered in gold. Lena, sorry to interrupt, she said, her voice professional but warm. The Nakamura party's here for their tasting, and Rolling Stone wants to confirm your interview slot for the summer feature. Also, your label called about the second album's release date. I nodded. Thanks, Amara. Tell them I'll be there in 10. She glanced at my family, sensing the tension, and retreated to the kitchen. A second album? Sarah asked, her voice tinged with awe. And Rolling Stone? I nodded. Out this fall. The interview's next week. My mother's eyes widened. Lena, we had no idea. Her tone was almost pleading, as if she could rewrite the past with admiration. My father cleared his throat. You've clearly got a head for business. That's the Carver in you. His attempt to claim credit sparked a flicker of anger. No, I said firmly. I built this without your name, your money, or your connections. This is mine. Daniel, who'd been quiet, spoke up, his voice careful. So, tonight was what, a test? You let us make fools of ourselves? I met his eyes. I didn't make you do anything. You chose your words, your judgments. I just listened. Claire's eye. Face reddened, her earlier barbs haunting her. That's manipulative, Lena. I raised an eyebrow. More manipulative than assuming I'm in debt or dating someone rich to afford this dinner? You weren't worried about me, Claire. You were enjoying feeling superior. My mother gasped softly, but no one contradicted me. Javier approached, with a bottle of aged cognac, my personal reserve for investor meetings. For your guests, Miss Lena, he said, his tone warm, and Amara says the kitchen's ready when you are. Thank you, Javier, I replied. I'll be there soon. As he left, I turned back to my family, their faces a mix of shame and recalibration. I have a meeting, I said, standing. Thanks for coming tonight. My mother reached out, her voice urgent. Lena, wait. We need to talk about this. You can't just drop this and leave. I glanced toward the private dining room, where my investors, discussing a second Orium location in Portland, were waiting. I have a business to run, I said. Family hasn't been a priority for you in 6 years. It doesn't get to trump my commitments now. My father stood, his discomfort clear. Let's continue this tomorrow. Dinner at our place? Daniel nodded eagerly. We could discuss your expansion. My firm has hospitality contacts. I cut him off. I don't need your contacts, Daniel. I built this because it's my passion, not to win your approval. Claire stepped forward, her voice softer. I'm sorry, Lena. I was awful tonight. I didn't know. Her apology caught me off guard, a crack in her usual armor. You didn't need to know I was successful to treat me with respect, I said. But I hear you. My father cleared his throat, a rare admission coming. We were wrong, Lena. We should have supported you, regardless of the outcome. His words, so unlike him, carried weight. My mother's eyes glistened. Where do we go from here? I paused, the question heavier than I'd expected. They were my family, flawed and judgmental, but tied to me by history, late-night talks with Claire, fishing trips with Daniel, even my father's rare smiles when I'd aced a math test. I don't know, I admitted. But if we're going to try, it's on new terms. I'm not your failure anymore. I'm a businesswoman, an artist, and I deserve respect for that. Daniel nodded slowly. Fair enough. Sarah, quieter, now said, We'd love you at the promotion party next month. As our sister, not whatever we thought. I softened slightly. I'll think about it. And I could host a private event here for your team if you want. My gift. Daniel's eyes widened. You'd do that? You're still my brother, I said simply. But this is on my terms. As they gathered their things, I added, I'm free Sunday for brunch. Not your club, though? There's a diner in Capitol Hill I love. They nodded, my mother's relief palpable, and I watched them leave, the night's weight lifting as the door closed behind them. As my family filed out of Orium, the glass doors swinging shut behind them, I stood in the now quiet dining room, the jazz trio's final notes fading into the hum of the restaurant's closing routine. My navy dress felt lighter, as if shedding the weight of their judgment had unburdened me physically. I exhaled, long and slow, the adrenaline of my revelation settling into a strange calm. I'd spent 6 years building a life apart from them. My album, my studio, this restaurant, and tonight I'd laid it bare. Their shock, their apologies, their sudden eagerness to claim a piece of my success, it was both vindicating and exhausting. I glanced at the private dining room where my investors waited, but for a moment I lingered, letting the reality sink in. I'd changed the story they'd written for me. Amara, my chef de cuisine, approached, her white coat slightly wrinkled from a long night. You okay, Lena? she asked, her dark eyes searching. I smiled, grateful for her quiet strength. Yeah, just family stuff. She chuckled. Tell me about it. My dad still calls me the cook like I'm flipping. Burgers at a diner. I laughed, the tension easing. Let's check the summer menu before I meet the investors, I said. She nodded, leading me toward the kitchen, my sanctuary, where the clatter of pans and the scent of fresh herbs grounded me. The kitchen was alive with the controlled chaos of closing, Javier wiping down bottles, Nadia counting the register, line cooks scrubbing stations. I leaned against the pass, reviewing Amara's notes on new dishes, a peach and burrata salad, a cedar-planked salmon with miso glaze. These are solid, I said, scribbling a suggestion for a juniper berry infusion. Let's test the salmon tomorrow. Amara grinned. You got it, boss. Her pride in our work mirrored my own, a reminder of the family I'd built here, bound by passion, not blood. As we wrapped up, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Can we talk tomorrow? I feel awful about tonight. Coffee? I stared at the screen, surprised by her initiative. Claire had always been the least confrontational, hiding behind her phone or her studies, but her apology at the table had felt real. I texted back, agreeing to meet at a cafe near Pike Place Market. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. I slipped my phone into my clutch and headed to the private dining room, where my investors, a trio from a Portland venture capital firm, waited to discuss a second Aurium location. The meeting was brisk, focused. They loved the concept. A smaller, coastal-inspired Aurium with a rooftop stage for live music. I pitched a menu blending Pacific Northwest ingredients with global influences, paired with a curated playlist of local artists. We're in, said their lead, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel. Send us the numbers by next week. I nodded, my mind already racing with ideas. As they left, I returned to my usual table, the restaurant now empty except for a few staff, finishing up. I pulled out my notebook where I'd been drafting liner notes for my second album, Roots and Wings. The words weren't flowing yet, but tonight's events had stirred something. I thought back to the dinner, replaying their faces when I'd revealed the truth. My mother's flustered grasp at her pearls, Daniel's lawyerly calculation, Claire's quiet shame. They'd spent years dismissing my music as a childish whim, yet tonight, they'd sat in my restaurant, eating my food, listening to my curated jazz, unaware it was all mine. Their apologies, though sincere in parts, were tinged with self-interest. My father's talk of Carver business sense, Daniel's sudden networking pitch. Only Claire's and Ethan's words had felt uncalculated, a crack in the wall we'd built between us. 6 years ago, I'd left Bellevue with nothing but defiance and a guitar. L.A. had tested me, sleepless nights in Elena Voss's studio, rejection letters piling up, gigs that paid in exposure rather than cash. But every song I wrote, every chord I struck, was a step toward myself. Whispers of Truth had been my breakthrough, its raw honesty resonating with millions. Solstice Sounds, my studio, had grown into a hub for new artists, and Aurium was my heart made tangible, a place where strangers connected over food and music. I'd done it without my family's approval, and that was the point. Their validation, once my deepest craving, now felt irrelevant. Yet, as I sat in the quiet, I couldn't deny the pull of family. Despite their judgment, there were memories. Claire sneaking me her Halloween candy, Daniel teaching me to ride a bike, my mother's rare, unguarded laughter during holiday baking. They were flawed, infuriating, but they were mine. Tonight had shifted something, not just in them but in me. I no longer needed their approval, but I wondered if we could find a new way to coexist, one that didn't demand I shrink to fit their expectations. My phone buzzed again, a text from Daniel. Promotion parties next month. Would love Aurium. To host if you're serious. No pressure. I smiled slightly. His tone was different, less smug, almost respectful. I replied, confirming I'd consider it, but only if we set clear boundaries. No networking, no leveraging my success for their status. I set the phone down and opened my notebook again, the words for my album's intro finally taking shape. Music has always been my truth, I wrote. When words failed, I sang. When paths diverged, I followed my heart. This album is a map of that journey. Not just the triumphs, but the nights I doubted I'd make it. The scars I earned. The courage it took to choose myself. 6 years ago, I walked away from expectation, choosing a life that felt like mine. It cost me family, security, and countless sleepless nights, but it gave me something greater, the freedom to create, to connect, to live authentically. These songs are my story, but they're also for anyone who's ever had to fight for their own voice. I paused, the pen hovering. The words felt right, raw and true, like the songs I'd written in my darkest moments. Orium's lights dimmed as the last staff members called their goodnights. Javier lingered, checking the bar. "You good, Lena?" he asked. "Better than I expected," I said, closing my notebook. He grinned. "Family's tough, but you handled it like a pro." I laughed, grateful for his loyalty. "See you tomorrow," I said, and he waved, heading out. Alone, I walked through the dining room, my fingers trailing over the velvet chairs. This place was my proof, not to them, but to myself, that I'd built something real. The brunch I'd suggested for Sunday at a gritty Capitol Hill diner was a test. Could they meet me on my terms, in a place that valued substance over status? I wasn't sure, but I was willing to try. My family's shift tonight, from condescension to awe, wasn't a fairy tale ending. Real change, I was learning, came in small, uneven steps, not grand gestures. As I locked up, my phone buzzed again. My mother. "Looking forward to Sunday. We're proud of you, Lena." The words felt foreign, almost fragile, but they stirred something in me. Not the desperate need for approval I'd once carried, but a cautious hope for something new. I slipped my notebook into my bag and stepped into the cool Seattle night, the city's lights reflecting off the sound. Tomorrow I'd meet Claire, plan the summer menu, call my label about the album. But tonight, I felt a quiet peace. I'd chosen my path, scars and all, and that was enough. The morning after the dinner at Orium, I woke to the soft patter of Seattle rain against my apartment window, the city cloaked in a familiar gray. My studio loft in Belltown, with its exposed brick and mismatched furniture, felt like a sanctuary, a far cry from the sterile Bellevue mansion of my childhood. I lay in bed, replaying last night's revelation, the stunned faces of my family, the weight of their apologies, the cautious hope in their eyes as they left. I'd spent 6 years defining myself apart from them, building a life through music and Orium, yet their presence lingered, stirring memories I'd buried. Today, I'd meet Claire for coffee, a tentative step toward something new. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, grabbed my notebook, and headed out, the city's damp air grounding me. The cafe near Pike Place Market was a cozy hole in the wall, its walls lined with local art and mismatched mugs. Claire was already there, tucked into a corner booth, her usual polished look softened by a ponytail and no makeup. She stood as I approached, her smile hesitant. "Lena, thanks for coming," she said, hugging me awkwardly. I slid into the booth, ordering a black coffee while she nursed a latte. The hum of the cafe, baristas calling orders, the clink of spoons, felt like a buffer, easing the tension between us. "I owe you an apology," Claire started, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "Last night I was awful. I didn't mean to, I just didn't know." Her voice cracked, and I saw the younger sister who'd once snuck into my room to hear my songs. "You weren't alone," I said, my tone gentle but firm. "Everyone assumed I was failing. That's what hurt, not the words, but the ease of it." Claire nodded, her eyes downcast. "I was jealous, you know. You went after what you wanted. I'm in med school because it's expected, but sometimes I wonder if I'm even good at it." Her confession surprised me. Claire, the golden child, always seemed so certain. "You never said that before," I replied. She shrugged. "I didn't think you'd care. You were always so Free. I laughed softly, the irony sharp. Free came with a price. 6 years of ramen, rejections, sleeping on floors, but it was worth it. Claire looked up, her eyes searching. How'd you do it, Lena? All this? Orium, the album, the studio? I told her the story. LA's grind, Elena Voss's mentorship, the viral hit, the deal, Solstice Sounds, Orium's birth. She listened, rapt, as if seeing me for the first time. I'm proud of you, she said quietly, the words carrying a weight her usual sarcasm never could. I want to be better, Lena. Can we try? I nodded, feeling a warmth I hadn't expected. Yeah, we can try, but it's got to be real. No more jabs, no more assumptions. She agreed, and we spent the next hour talking, not as rivals, but as sisters, sharing stories of her residency and my studio sessions. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Back at Orium that afternoon, I dove into work, the rhythm of the eye, restaurant soothing my nerves. Amara and I tested the cedar-planked salmon for the summer menu, its smoky miso glaze a hit with the staff. Javier suggested a new Riesling to pair with it, and Nadia updated me on bookings, fully reserved for the next 3 months. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from my label. The second album's lead single was ready for mixing. I smiled, the pieces of my life clicking into place. But my family's faces lingered, their shift from disdain to awe replaying in my mind. That evening, I sat at my usual table, the restaurant winding down, and opened my notebook to work on Roots and Wings. The liner notes were taking shape, a reflection of my journey from Bellevue's expectations to Seattle's freedom. Every song. Here is a scar and a victory, I wrote. I chose music when it cost me everything, family, stability, certainty. But in that choice, I found myself. This album is for anyone who's ever stood at a crossroads, knowing the right path might break their heart but take them home. The words flowed, raw and true, like the best songs I'd written. My phone buzzed. AI text from my mother. Sunday brunch confirmed. We'll be at your diner. Looking forward to it. I paused, surprised by her willingness to meet me on my terms. The diner, with its greasy spoons and vinyl booths, was a far cry from their country. Club, but it was real like me. I texted back, confirming, then saw a message from Daniel. Talked to Sarah. We'd love Orium for the party, on your terms. Thanks, Lena. His tone was genuine, a shift I hadn't expected. I replied, agreeing to discuss details later, feeling a cautious optimism. Sunday brunch at the diner was different. My parents arrived, visibly out of place in their tailored coats, but they tried. My father complimented the hash browns, a small miracle. My mother asked about my album, her questions halting but curious. Daniel and Sarah shared wedding plans, including me without their usual condescension. Claire, fresh from a hospital shift, laughed at my stories of early gigs, her warmth unguarded. It wasn't a hallmark moment. There were awkward silences, old tensions simmering, but it was progress. As we left, my mother hugged me, her embrace lingering. We're trying, Lena, she whispered. I nodded, believing her, just a little. The weeks that followed were a blur. I mixed the album's single, a soulful ballad called Open Road, which my label predicted would chart high. Orium's summer menu launched to rave reviews, and the Portland investors greenlit the second location. I started a mentorship program at Solstice Sounds, teaching young musicians from underserved communities to write and produce. One, a 17-year-old named Marcus, had a gift for lyrics that reminded me of my younger self. Watching him record his first demo, I felt a purpose deeper than any award. My family's efforts continued, fragile but real. My father emailed me a Forbes article about women in the music industry, a silent nod to my world. Claire invited me to her hospital's fundraiser, not as a trophy, but as her sister. Daniel asked to tour Orium's kitchen, curious about my process. My mother called weekly, her formality softening into genuine interest. They weren't perfect. Old habits crept in, like my father's offer to connect me with a better investor. But I set boundaries, and they listened mostly. One night, after closing Orium, I sat with Amara, sharing a glass of the Riesling. Javier had paired with the salmon. "How's the family thing going?" she asked, her tone teasing but kind. "Better," I said, swirling my glass. "Not fixed, but better." She nodded. "That's how it goes. Messy but worth it if they show up." I smiled, grateful for her wisdom. As she left, I opened my notebook, adding to the album's notes. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who see you, scars and all. As I walked back to my loft, the rain had stopped, the city glowing under a rare clear sky. I thought of Marcus's demo, Amara's salmon, Claire's coffee date, my family's halting efforts. The validation I'd once craved from them was fading, replaced by a deeper truth. I'd built my worth, note by note, plate by plate. Their respect was a bonus, not the goal. I pulled out my phone, recording a voice memo for a new song, a melody about bridges rebuilt, not burned. The path ahead wasn't certain, but it was mine, and that was enough. The weeks after the brunch with my family passed in a flurry of creation and connection. Seattle's summer arrived, soft and fleeting, with long evenings that bathed Orem in golden light. My days were packed, mixing tracks for Roots and Wings at Solstice Sounds, finalizing the summer menu with Amara, and meeting with Portland investors to break ground on the second Orem. Yet, amidst the chaos, a quiet shift was unfolding. My family's efforts to rebuild our bond, though imperfect, were reshaping the edges of my life. I wasn't chasing their approval anymore, but I was learning to let them in, one small gesture at a time. One Saturday morning, I stood in Solstice Sounds watching Marcus, my 17-year-old mentee, lay down vocals for his first single. His voice, raw and soulful, filled the studio, each lyric a story of his life in Rainier Valley. "That's it," I said through the intercom, grinning. "You're killing it." He flashed a shy smile, adjusting his headphones. My mentorship program, now 6 weeks old, was thriving. 8 young artists, all from underserved neighborhoods, learning to write, produce, and perform. Marcus was the standout, his talent a mirror of my own hungry teenage years. Guiding him felt like paying forward Elena Voss's belief in me, a cycle of faith I hadn't expected to find. That afternoon, I met Claire at Orem for lunch. She'd asked to see the kitchen, curious about my world. Amara gave her a tour, explaining the sourcing of our heirloom tomatoes while I watched, amused by Claire's wide-eyed awe. Over plates of peach burrata salad, she opened up about her residency, the exhaustion, the doubt. "I don't know if I'm cut out for surgery," she admitted, her voice low. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to be perfect, Claire, just be you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw not the rival sister, but a woman searching for her own path. We parted with a hug, promising to meet again soon. Daniel's promotion party loomed, and we'd finalized plans for Orem to host. I curated a menu, cedar-planked salmon, Wagyu sliders, blackberry tarts, and booked a jazz quartet I'd discovered at a local festival. Daniel, true to his word, respected my boundaries, keeping his firm's networking pitches at bay. The night of the party, Orem glowed, the dining room alive with laughter and clinking glasses. Daniel pulled me aside, his tie loosened, a rare grin on his face. "This is incredible, Lena. Thank you." I nodded, warmth spreading through me. "You're welcome, big brother." Sarah, his fiancée, joined us, her usual polish softened by genuine gratitude. "I misjudged you," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." I smiled, letting it go. "We're good." My parents attended too, their presence a test of our fragile truce. My father, Charles, complimented the salmon, a small victory. My mother, Victoria, asked about my album's release, her questions more curious than performative. They stayed late, mingling with Daniel's colleagues, and as they left, my mother hugged me tightly. "We're so proud," she whispered. The words, once my deepest craving, felt lighter now, not a lifeline, but a bridge. I hugged her back, meaning it. The album's lead single, Open Road, dropped a week later, climbing charts faster than my label predicted. Radio stations played it on repeat, and fans flooded my socials with stories of how it resonated. I sat in my loft one night reading their messages, tears pricking my eyes. This was why I made music, not for accolades, but for connection. Roots and Wings was set to release in October, and Rolling Stone confirmed my cover feature, a milestone I'd once dreamed of in LA's dive bars. Yet the quiet moments, Marcus's first track, Claire's vulnerability, Amara's grin over a perfect dish, felt just as vital. One evening after closing Orium, I sat at my usual table, the restaurant empty save for Javier polishing glasses. My notebook lay open, the final liner notes for Roots and Wings complete. "This album is my heart laid bare," I'd written. It's the sound of choosing yourself when the world says no, of building a life from ashes, of finding family in unexpected places. I lost much to get here. Certainty, safety, the approval I once craved, but I gained more. A voice, a purpose, a home in my own skin. May these songs remind you that your path, however winding, is yours to claim. I closed the notebook satisfied. The words captured my journey, from Bellevue's expectations to Seattle's freedom. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. "Saw your single on the radio. Impressive, Lena." I smiled, surprised by his effort. He'd started texting weekly, short messages about articles or memories, like the time I'd caught my first fish at Lake Sammamish. Claire sent photos from her hospital rounds asking for playlist recommendations. Daniel invited me to his wedding, not as a status guest, but as family. My mother mailed a handwritten note, recalling a childhood song I'd written for her birthday. These gestures, small and halting, were rewriting our story, not with grand apologies, but with quiet presence. I launched a second mentorship session at Solstice Sounds, adding 4 more teens to the program. One, a shy girl named Aisha, wrote poetry that begged to be set to music. I paired her with Marcus, watching their collaboration bloom. Orium's Portland location secured permits, and I sketched a rooftop stage design, dreaming of summer nights with live bands. Amara and I planned a fall menu incorporating Marcus's idea for a mole-inspired dish, a nod to his heritage. My life felt full, not with perfection, but with purpose. One Sunday, I took my family to another diner, this one in Fremont, with sticky tables and the best pancakes in town. They showed up, my parents, Daniel, Sarah, Claire, unfazed by the lack of valet. We laughed over burnt coffee, shared stories of my disastrous first gig, Daniel's law school pranks, Claire's childhood obsession with frogs. My mother asked about my mentorship program, genuinely curious. My father offered to fund a scholarship for my students, and I accepted, setting clear terms. It wasn't seamless. Old tensions flared, like my mother's subtle jab about my unconventional career, but we navigated it, learning. Back at Orium that night, I sat alone, the jazz playlist I'd curated playing softly. Javier had left a glass of my favorite Riesling, a silent gesture of support. I opened my notebook, sketching lyrics for a new song about rebuilding, bridges, not walls. My family's change wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy, human, real. But so was I. I'd spent years proving my worth, not to them, but to myself. Their respect was a gift, not the goal. I'd found my voice, my home, in music, in Orium, in the kids I mentored. That was the true triumph. As I locked up, the Seattle skyline sparkled, the Space Needle a quiet sentinel. I felt peace, not because everything was perfect, but because I was enough. My scars, rejections, doubts, lonely nights, were part of the melody, making the highs sweeter. I walked home, humming Open Road, ready for whatever came next. Have you ever had to choose between others' expectations and your own dreams? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Share where you're from and what's driven you to follow your heart. If this journey moved you, please give it a like. It helps spread the word. Subscribe for more stories of grit and growth, and share with someone who needs a reminder. The truest success is living your truth. Thanks for being here.